And when you are being held back by a fear or a belief, it sometimes isn't as easy as just being like, oh, okay, well, I'm over it now. Like, if it was, we'd all be over it and we would all be visible online. It wouldn't be keeping us hiding in these different aspects. So, the first step for me was really the discovery of what specifically was holding me back.
This is the Authentic Brand Builders Podcast with Michelle Knight.
Welcome back to another episode of the Authentic Brand Builders Podcast. Today, we are taking a personal approach, although I feel like most of the things we talk about here on the podcast are incredibly personal. And I want to talk about a recent discovery that I had about my business. Now, let's back it up a bit and talk about visibility and showing up online. I don't think I need to remind you that putting yourself out there on the internet is a massive part of actually having a business and getting said business paid. But I do see with my clients and time again that there is often a fear around visibility that is actually holding them back. And this can manifest itself in a lot of different ways, from not coming up with content ideas to having a lot of drafts or ideas or things created and not posting them, to avoiding a platform altogether, which is a bit about my story we're going to talk about in a second. And this can really hinder the growth of your business because visibility marketing is crucial. Such a fundamental piece. You can have the most amazing brand, you can have the most amazing offer, but if people don't know that it exists, they can't pay you for it. So many of you know about my relationship with social media. I am incredibly outspoken about my relationship with social media as an online business owner and entrepreneur. While it is definitely a platform that I use as a consumer from time to time, I have always really struggled to find my place within these different platforms. And over the years, I have shared how I have navigated this, how I have still shown up, how I have still been visible, how I've still grown my business, clients, leads, all of those things through SEO-specific platforms. But recently, I sat down and I asked myself, why? Why am I nervous about showing up on those platforms? Or what had been holding me back from liking these platforms? And I uncovered that it was a fear around visibility. Now, if you asked me if I was afraid to be visible, I would say absolutely not. I show up, I create content, I'm making a video and a podcast right now about something that is personal and authentic. But there was a relationship that I had created around social media. And through my journaling, through my discovery, I found out via myself, my own personal counseling session, that I was really afraid that I would be judged online, that there was something different about the communities on social media versus what we're seeing on YouTube, podcasting, blog, things of that nature. And I think a lot of this really comes from being in this industry a long time, hearing from my friends who have gotten blasted online or have gotten mean comments or have gotten trolled. Even just recently inside of my academy on a strategy call, we had someone speaking very openly about how their friend had gone viral and was being stalked and targeted. And those things are true, right? And I hadn't realized or made the connection that this fear was actually what was keeping me from wanting to show up on those platforms. Because just like you, I have a ton of ideas. I see things and I'm like, oh, I could totally make that work for my business. I get inspired. I love them. I heart them. But I was hitting a wall. I was hitting a spot. So through this little journal deep dive, and I'm going to share some of my favorite prompts with you in just a bit, I had to really ask myself, like, how is this holding me back in my business? And I'm a big fan of self-assessment. I'm a big fan of analyzing what's working and what's not working and finding the gaps. And that's exactly what I did in this instant. Because the moment that I could identify what was really keeping me from showing up and enjoying something, the moment I could start saying, okay, but this is how we can approach it in an authentic way. And I think that that's really, really important. This is how we build authentic and aligned businesses. This is our motto here at Brand Mary. To create authentic and aligned businesses, we sometimes have to have these conversations with ourselves and ask ourselves, why does something not feel right? What is keeping us from taking action? What are we afraid of? And that's exactly what I did. And so one of the things that I discovered while I was going through this process was that I missed being creative from a social standpoint. While I love creating YouTube videos and I love creating podcasts and I love creating blogs, I'm only doing one of those a week. But every day I am wanting to tap into these little creative elements of being an online business owner and being a brand strategist. And I personally love behind the scenes. I love watching people's Instagram stories and seeing what they're doing with their families and using nonverbal storytelling communication like reels and things to even teach on things that they're passionate about. But because of the relationship that I had created with social media, specifically Instagram in this case, I wasn't doing any of that. And I felt like I was lacking a bit of my creative juices. They just were not flowing. And when my creative juices aren't flowing, nothing else is working in my business. And that's something that I know about myself. So I really had to not only journal on this and discover what was actually holding me back, but then I had to ask myself, okay, well, what do I do about this? What do I do with this information? Because just having this information is not enough. I need to choose how I move forward. I could continue to not show up, but clearly there was a desire and a pull to show up creatively in this way. Maybe not specifically like, I want to be on Instagram, but I wanted to be showing up on more of a social platform to create more of a social community and be able to express myself in this way. So I went on and I started making a list of like, what are the things that I would love to be talking about on social media? What are the things that would make this a fun experiment that would take a lot of the pressure off? Let's say, as a business owner, as somebody who specializes in marketing and specializes in branding, it can be really easy for me to get on a new platform to quote unquote have fun. And it turns into a whole like obsession analysis, if you will, because I have studied marketing for so long. I know it works. I know it doesn't work. I know what to look at with the data and the numbers. And so I find that when I sometimes will, be doing something for funsies, it becomes a not so fun situation. Can you relate? So I really had to ask myself, like, if I'm going to redefine my relationship with social media, if I'm really going to, go on this path and try and reestablish how I feel about these specific platforms, I need to be having fun in the process. And so as I was journaling and coming up with these things, what I kept coming back to was just this personal branding side of everything. This, who am I? What do I love? Creating community. What does my day-to-day look like? And how can I share that without educating, without focused on, I sell this product and I do this in my business. And I had this realization that like, your girl needs a passion project. And if I was able to have fun with this process, lead from inspiration, not have a content calendar, not have these different things, because I already have those pieces in place, right? I have the YouTube videos, I have the podcast, I have the blog, I'm on Pinterest, my SEO is optimized. I've laid a solid foundation, but it felt like something was slightly missing. And so I decided that what I wanted to do was I wanted to experiment and play on TikTok specifically. Now, the reason I'm guiding you through this whole process and being really transparent is I want you to understand that there are multiple steps to visibility. And when you are being held back by a fear or a belief, it sometimes isn't as easy as just being like, oh, okay, well, I'm over it now. Like if it was, we'd all be over it and we would all be visible online. It wouldn't be keeping us hiding in these different aspects. So the first step for me was really the discovery of what specifically was holding me back. because it really was this fear around being seen and this fear around being judged. So then I had to ask myself, okay, well, what would allow me to show up and experiment while still having fun? What kind of topics would I like to talk about? What kind of platform would I want to be on? What would make this an enjoyable experience? And then the art of taking action. And so I'm in the thick of this right now. But because it's not I'm going to use a business move, right? It is in some sense because I am able to tap into my creativity and have fun, which is going to allow me to be a better business owner. In fact, I noticed, and this is kind of we're in the thick of it thing, but I did notice last week when I was consistently posting on TikTok, I had a ton of business ideas. Like I recorded 3 YouTube videos last week because I just started thinking about branding and all these different things. Like my creativity was triggered in my brain and it was just pew, 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 pew in all areas of my life. And so I think there's something to be said about that. But being in the thick of it, I'm only really like a week in. And I wanted to document this. That's part of the reason for this podcast episode. You're going to see a few more about this over the next few months, years. I don't know. I'll see how long it takes. On what it feels like and how it is impacting my business. Because I have seen this with a lot of entrepreneurs who choose to take sabbatical or close their business down. And this is something I've talked about a lot on the podcast previously about, knowing who you are and being authentic and doing what serves you so that you can avoid maybe having to do that. And while I know there are a lot of factors that come into play, from lifestyle changes to family dynamic to money, like all these different things are why someone ultimately chooses to take a sabbatical. I do see entrepreneurs who have been around as long as I have, longer than I have. And from my own experiences, that oftentimes it is the redundancy. It is the mundane of like, okay, you put the foundations in place, you have these pieces and you're kind of rinsing and repeating. And do you reach a point years down the line where you're longing or craving something else? And I think that's why a lot of people will maybe release a physical product, or they will move into public speaking, or they will write a book. Like it all makes so much sense. And so because my capacity and my time is not fully available to me as a homeschool mama, and I know many of you who are caregivers and homeschool parents can relate, I needed to find a way to do it in micro doses. And that's ultimately how I landed on this adventure. So it has been a little over a week of posting over on TikTok. And my whole approach to it is personal branding. Not teaching branding, but sharing my personal brand. What makes me me? Things that playing and experimenting with humor, which is something I haven't really done with my brand before, but I think I'm funny sometimes. And so being able to experiment with that without the pressure of, is this working? Is this performing? Is this leading to conversions? Because again, the creative side of my brain was longing for something else. And so it's been such an interesting journey. And then let me also say that this journaling session happened almost 60 days ago. So it did take me a while to continue to journal and to continue to deep dive and figure out, okay, well, what does this actually mean for me? Will I do this forever? I don't know. Will I do this for 30 days and then decide this is silly? I don't want to do this anymore. We don't know. This is a journey. But the real purpose that I wanted to share this journey with you is because visibility is key. And maybe you are not showing up anywhere. And so this could be the first step in discovering why. What is keeping you from showing up on these specific platforms or doing that thing that you keep thinking about? You see, it would be fun. I could totally do that. I could be an influencer. I could sell a digital course. I could, create a group for moms, like whatever it is. Like, what is keeping you from actually doing that? But then also for all my established entrepreneurs who maybe are wanting to create a separate branch or are discovering that, okay, I'm making money. I built this business, but there's something else scratching at the surface going, hey, hi there. We would love for you to explore this. We think that this would be fun for you. How do you do that? And that, for me, that's where I am. And that's why I was really feeling called to share this journey with all of you. So, as I mentioned before, I think no matter what you're doing, no matter where you're at, the first step is to really sit down and journal and think about these pieces. So, I wanted to share 3 journal prompts with you that helped me start my discovery. And then I'm a huge fan of free writing. And so I like to ask myself like 2 to 3 questions and then let my brain just go and just keep writing and keep diving deeper into those specific things. So, yeah, there's only 3. It's not like it's a whole, I'm going to share them with you now. It's not like a whole booklet, But I love to ask myself those 3 questions and then continue to kind of like dive deeper and see what ultimately comes from it. And I really think that this whole entire conversation came from the interview that I did with my friend Martina. Like, if I were to go back and kind of pinpoint when I was like diving into this, like we had that interview like early last month. And she asked an amazing question on the interview that helped her with her perfectionism in business. And one of the journal prompts she shared was like, if you had everyone in your life as your cheerleader and you couldn't mess up, what would you do? And that really kind of got my juices flowing. Like, what would I do? Where would I be now? And I think that really kind of ties into this first question, which is, what specific thoughts or situations come up when you imagine sharing your brand online? Now, I want you to flip this. So, what specific thoughts or situations come up when I think about sharing my brand online? And if you want to take it just a tad further with this question, specifically ask yourself, because I am all about specific questions. If I ask myself specific questions, I give myself specific answers. So, do I fear judgment, rejection, failure? And why do I think those fears exist? So that's number 1. Okay. And we will also add these to the show notes. If you ever want to look at the show notes or the blog, you can go to brandmary.com/blog and find the episode. And that will ultimately give you the show notes. I'm also going to put them actually below the YouTube video. So all of our podcast episodes, if you're listening, are also featured on YouTube. Sometimes you get to see my crazy hand movements and weird facial expressions when I record. Very entertaining. I will put them in the description below the video as well. Okay, number 2. If I could show up online without fear or judgment, what would I share? What would I say? How would I express myself? And then the third prompt is, what small step can I take to face these fears today? And this was the one that sent me on a 3-page, just full on, like, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this. And this is what I think is so empowering. And this is why I always structure my journal prompts kind of in this way when I'm journaling for myself, is I always ask myself, like, what do I need to uncover? And then go a step further and say, like, okay, but what does that actually mean? Or how would I show up differently? Or you're just going deeper. And then what do I do with this information? Because at the end of the day, all of this entire episode and episodes to come is about us showing up as our most authentic self, being visible online, even if it's not perfect, even if we are experimenting with something new that we've never done before, even though we have tons of expertise that could help us with this specific thing, like, it doesn't make it easier. It doesn't always make it easier. And the sooner that we can uncover what's really happening and we can create an action plan to start working through that, the faster we'll be able to show up online and be visible and express our creativity and grow our businesses, or whatever the outcome ultimately is for you, because the outcome will change at different stages of your business. I promise you that. When I started my podcast, my first goal was to express myself more vulnerably and practice vulnerably expressing myself through content creation without having a camera on my face. Because I had realized that while I loved being on camera, a lot of times I was really strategic and I was getting away from a lot of my storytelling, which is something I love to do. And then through the podcast, I started really fine-tuning that and practicing that to a point where I could then add the video back in and express myself in that way. So again, this happens no matter what platform you're thinking about showing up on or where you're showing up or whatever stage of business you're in. you most likely are holding yourself back in some area. And this could be a really great starting place for you. This also goes back to what I talk about a lot here at Brand Mary, which is all about creating an authentic and aligned brand. And so if you're tuning into this episode, whether you're watching it on YouTube, listening, while you're doing the dishes or folding the laundry, I know that there are a lot of people who also get stuck in the branding process. And I am just such an advocate that the foundational pieces of your brand are what's going to allow you to show up online. That when you feel confident in your messaging, when you feel confident in who you're speaking to, when you understand your mission and your values, it makes showing up a heck of a lot easier. Like, of course, you're going to have to go through some of these visibility hurdles. But when you get to that action step, like I said in prompt 3, and you tell yourself, this is what I'm going to do, you can do it because you've done this pre-work. And so if you are listening to this episode and you need to do that pre-work around your brand foundation, or you feel like you need to go back, I have a personal brand roadmap that I just recently updated and revamped that I would love for you to snag. You can go to brandmary.com/brand roadmap. I also will link it in the show notes and, of course, in the description below this video. It's completely free. It's going to give you the 5 steps for building your brand. It's breaking down each of those steps into why they're important, what it is, and how you can take action. And it's also going to talk about 3 mistakes that I see a lot of people make in the branding process. So again, if this whole episode and this conversation really had you thinking about your brand and who you are and how you would show up online, this might be a fantastic next step for you. And you can go to brandmary.com/brand roadmap to go ahead and snap it. As I mentioned, we will also put these 3 prompts below the YouTube description and in the show notes. So you can go to brandmary.com to get more information about that. And welcome to my journey. We're going to see how it all freaking plays out. If you want to come over and hang out with me on TikTok, I will not be talking about branding or marketing. But if you just want to know more about me, you can find me at Michelle Knight Co. over there. And I'm excited to see how this experiment and this playfulness and this funsy time helps me redefine my relationship, not only with visibility, but how I show up in the world and how I show up from a place of authenticity. Because I feel like I'm always just wanting to discover who I am, layer by, I am an onion, as Shrek would say. Did Donkey say that? One of them, it was Shrek. I am an onion, okay? And we're just peeling back the layers. We're peeling back the layers, unfortunately and fortunately, publicly, because we're business owners. But here we are. And through my own journey, I hope that I inspire you to dive a little bit deeper into yours. All right, I'll be back with another episode next week. We are pivoting here on the podcast. We're going to talk about advertising next week. But as you know, Authentic Brand Builder, it's authentic advertising. How do we run ads that are authentic to us in an AI world? And I'm excited that you're going to meet my guests next week. So I'll be back for another episode. Until then, happy journaling.